Last time we didn't really get very far as how this relates to some government conspiracy. Figured out what the name of the victim was, and it wasn't Shin, it was William Shamspeare, which isn't very useful. So, yeah, not much useful has been learned. So, as far as theories, quote unquote, are concerned, I can't really update anything. I just have to keep going. Uh, I guess on like the game, the mood of the game though, or the tonality, because the teasing of the overall mystery is starting to come into play, and the game is feeling slightly less episodic. It's starting to get a little bit more engrossive, which I just kind of made up a word there, an adjective form of engross, but it's starting to sort of addict me a little bit more, and it's starting to make me actually want to look forward to picking up on this again the next day. And so it's going to make my recordings, this won't really matter for the upload schedule, but it's going to make my recordings closer and closer together because I'm starting to get into it. Finally, like by the time I got past the midpoint, I'm already into the second game, so it took a while, but it seems to be finally happening. My goal of not saving during a trial, unless I need to stop the recording session or it prompts me, or get a game over during a trial anywhere in the second game, that drive is also like contributing to the engrossingness. Anyway, here we are again, the eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. We're here because Mr. Garadev's the one who discovered the incident this morning, don't forget. But he's still turned so that he's hiding his right cheek. I guess that's just the sprite they used. You chaps, eh? Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday. It was quite a trial. As much as Mr. Garadev as anyone, really. Okay. Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning. I wonder if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garadev. Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room. Those are exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? Mr. Garadev, can I show you this? Been quite a couple of days, as you can imagine. I'm afraid I'm rather tired. Haven't really got the energy in the old eyeballs, to be honest with you. Some other time, then. Soap. Same thing. Okay. Single apron drawing on that enormous can-shaped clothes horse. Look. No, Mr. Naruhodo, that's a real cannon. I knew that. I was just testing you. Piece of history, that is. Seen plenty of action on the battlefield, I can tell you. It's unclear how it managed to get its way up here. Now the old girl and I are just enjoying the peace and quiet of retirement together. And of course, she'd come in handy if the enemy decided to launch an attack again. Is there a war going on that I don't know about? A copy of Rance magazine. The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes is being read all over London. Isn't it wonderful? Naturally, one asks oneself if such a singular detective could really exist. Having met the chap, it's undeniable. He is most certainly singular. Singularly dangerous. That's genuine public opinion for you, Miss Susato. Perhaps it should be reflected in the stories. Make no mistake, Mr. Naruhodo, I intend to snuff out the sort of public opinion we just heard personally. I'm starting to see where Mr. Sholmes' untainted reputation comes from now. Sorry, there was a pause there. I'm starting to see where Mr. Sholmes' untainted reputation comes from now. That's your military uniform, isn't it, Mr. Garadeb? Well, ceremonial garb, yes. Or, in the United States we call that dress blues. Been hanging on the wall ever since my retirement bash. Not in active service now, you know. Doesn't mean much to me anymore. You could have the old thing if you wanted it. Well, it might suit Lord Van Zyke, perhaps. An overly ostentatious outfit like this could be just what he needs. Very tactful, Miss Susato. Very tactful indeed. Ah yes, those enormous mortar shells. It's quite something seeing them up close, isn't it? Didn't you say something about firing them into the barracks, Mr. Garadeb? Ah, you remember, do you? Just a little mishap that occurred during training one day. Why are you firing on your own men? The captain bellowed at me. I'm not surprised. A little mishap doesn't really do it justice, does it? Well, one has these little incidents when one's a hot-headed young private. Perhaps I should put some evidence that resulted from one of my little mishaps on display. Oh, does the great lawyer, like the great detective, want to exhibit some trophies of his finest moments? It is good to see Mr. Garadeb's Medal of Honor still proudly displayed on the wall. The inscription reads, "For distinguished participation," if you remember. Yes, I remember, because I remember thinking even I might stand a chance of picking an honors like that. Wouldn't you know it to look at me now, perhaps, but I have my devil-may-care days, you know. Devil-may-care? What did you get up to? Well, all in the past now, of course, and best left there. Best not. I want to know now. You look very dashing in your uniform there, Mr. Garadeb. Ah, that old portrait, eh? Drawn by an art student who used to rent the room downstairs. Oh, you look so wonderfully young and courageous and strong. Yes, well, the chap presented it to me one day and asked if I'd let him off the month's rent in return. Oh, I see. So you did, presumably? I bally well did not. Oh. Portrait is a portrait, but rent is rent. Eh. And yet it's still there, proudly on the wall. We know what the screen is hiding now. The aftermath of the fiery altercation the other day. Don't suppose I'll be able to clear that mess up for some time now. Oh dear, this must be a very difficult situation for you. I'll say, perhaps talk about twists of fate and whatnot. But this is a twist and a half, a rotten show all around. He's clearly struggling with everything that's happened. There's a good view over the wintry East End from up here. It's an oppressively gray scene. There's really nothing comparable in Japan. And down below, Briar Road, partly blanketed in snow. And the pavement where poor Miss Green was struck in the back by that knife. Thinking about it, this is the only room in this building that actually has a window to the outside world. Sometimes Great Britain really does seem like a strange land, doesn't it? I suppose all foreign cultures seem strange at first. Imagine how an Englishman would feel on arriving in Japan and seeing people with a Komaj top knot. Well, that's a good point. I pronounced that way wrong, didn't I? Yeah. Chomage. Chonmage. There we go. Chonmage. You can't pronounce it like... You have to, like, know how the romanization works. Cho-n-ma-ge. Okay. That's an impressive collection of cakes on that fancy silver cake stand there. I feel sure that it was full of cakes when we first investigated here as well. Yes, quite right. Haven't touched it since. Haven't done much at all, really, since it all happened. Time's rather stood still for me, you know. Oh. Well, people usually just don't eat cakes. Time stood still? Now that's an interesting phrase. I might be able to use that excuse when I'm next supposed to be tidying the office. You could just tidy up, Mr. Naruhodo. Shelves look like they've been completely torn apart by a wild beast. Reminds me of the Battle of my wand, don't you know? The experiences of a seasoned veteran. Enemy had us surrounded on all sides. We really thought we were done for, the whole Bali company. We were taking a real pounding from their cannons, so all we could do was run for our lives. Oh, I thought the story was going in a different direction, actually. Well, if you were surrounded on all sides, how do you run? Well, the whole experience taught me one thing, I can tell you. When you're done for, you're really done for. That's not what a lawyer who often finds himself under fire wants to hear. I thought it was going to be he who runs away lives to fight another day, but whatever. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I hear that you discovered what had happened. Well, that hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no Bali answer. And that's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door. Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course. Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning. Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that. Is it just me, or is he avoiding my gaze now all of a sudden? Except that it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door. So the whole thing of he half an hour late, he must have had something else that made it suspicious that he died. Besides that he didn't come out after half an hour. Because, yeah, okay. There's some other, like, sign. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspear, I believe. Is that right? Yes, William Shamspear. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now. And how would you describe him? In a word, destitute. Destitute? Well, let's face it, the only redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that is either broke, or has the Bali screw loose. So hard to choose which category Soseki-san would fall into. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude. He was doing research as well. Research into what? Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that. Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He is known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. Or Sao. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. Imagine he and Mr. Shamspeare would have much. I imagine he and Mr. Shamspeare would have much in common, and we know that's true, actually. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's hope it's not that. Mr. Naruhodo, really? How rude. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning? Well now, it must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time. Mr. Garrett noticed there was no light from his room or something, I suppose. Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shamspeare got back, and the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark there. Well, thank you. That was a little illuminating. 1 to 5 is only 4 hours, and I would be dead. Is everything alright, Miss Susato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Garadeb, you were up here in your room all evening, if I've understood correctly? Not a big fan of stairs. Not with this blasted leg. Then, how is it that you seem to know the precise moments of your tenant on the ground floor, I mean? Ah, that's a very good point. I can't imagine that you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it? I say I know what you're thinking, and it's a bally outrage. I'm an ex-military, don't you know? I don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I? Wow, even Garadeb has a Celette too. Then how did you know, Mr. Garadeb? It's the gas, woman. The gas tells me everything. The gas? What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything? Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by pipes. Yes, I'd more or less worked that out. Every room in this building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside, and the gas company supplies gas to properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too. Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen? Well, obviously the room would get brighter. Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment. What, they dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it. That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable. Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out. I barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here and they glow brighter in the rest of the house. Ah, right, I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere. You've got it. Of course, because when people come back home in the evening and before they go to sleep at night, that they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever. In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house. Gosh. That's fascinating, Mr. Garadeb. Absolutely fascinating. Oh well, nothing to it, really. And I can't really see what it's going to help us with the case. That's going to help us with the case either. Oh, it will, Ryanosuke, it will. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Garadeb is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. You want to look at the soap, apparently. Or to the examines, I guess you move again. I think we already exhausted here, but I wanted to, like, pan over the whole thing one more time, just in case. The Garadeb household and Mr. Natsume's lodgings are in a prominent position there on the corner. Sometimes when I look at the building, I can't help feeling that it's at a bit of a slant. It does rather look as though it would collapse at even the smallest earthquake, doesn't it? And isn't it supposed to be haunted as well? I think I might have a hunch to say as to why Mr. Soseki-san has such a hunched back. There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Garadeb residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped though, especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, do you think? No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear, I fear you may be right. With the exception of the top floor where Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb live, all the windows are bricked up. Yes, that's because of an old window tax that was charged by the number of windows a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of their windows. The tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? So the windows could all be opened up again, surely. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have the work done. Yes, that is a sad state of affairs. Especially for people like poor Mr. Natsume, who have to live all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. London is blanketed by fog again today, and the sky is covered in cloud. But if you look carefully in the distance, you can make out the Crystal Tower being built. Ah, the Crystal Tower, yes, the centerpiece of the great exhibition that is to open in 6 months' time. Everyone's talking about the Great Exhibition of London at the moment, it seems. Well, it's to be the largest event of its kind anywhere in the world, with technology and scientists from all over. And probably when the last murder of this series is going to take place. I can't wait for it myself. Do you think visiting students from the Far East, like us, will be granted entry? The last great exhibition was held in London. Had more than 6 million visitors, it seems. And this time the British are determined to make it an even bigger success, to outdo the Paris Exposition. I see, that's an incredible number of people. And with so many people expected to attend, we should easily be able to slip in unnoticed. There's always the honest approach of buying tickets at the main entrance, Mr. Naruhodo. Why has somebody built a snowman on some sort of pedestal, do you think? That's not a pedestal, Mr. Naruhodo. It's part of the snowman's body. Really? But it already has a perfectly good body. Well, it's true that British snowmen are usually made with 2 balls of snow. Perhaps this is a foreigner. And now we're looking at him as if he's strange. Poor man, I know how he feels. If anything, it's Japanese and British 2-ball snowmen that are the strange ones, isn't it? After all, real people do have 3 sections: head, torso, and legs. Do you ever think that perhaps you think about things too much? Okay, got all that. Nine. Why can't I examine this again? What? This enormous machine takes up the entire desk, doesn't it? It really is very imposing. Ah, Hurley's great analytoscope, yes. It can analyze anything at all, you know. But I've never seen anything actually using it. Seen anyone actually using it. Well, it's his invention, so I don't know how to operate it. Why don't you get it to analyze its own operation, then? Oh, Runo, you're razor sharp today, aren't you? There's all sorts of these shelves. Chemistry apparatus, books, papers, and lots of things I've never seen before. And all heaped so high, I can't help feeling that the whole lot is going to topple at any moment. Looks as though it might topple, and yet it doesn't. The epitome of Mr. Sholmes' brilliance. I don't get it. As it happens, I'm quite well practiced when it comes to stacking shelves myself. Just the other day, the shelf in my office finally gave way under the strain, though. Looks as though it might topple, and it does. Yes, the epitome of your disarray. Actually, It's epitome. I can't read. I really don't get it. This is Mr. Sholmes' famous violin. The one he found being sold for a song at a pawnbrokery. What's it called again? A shoddy something? Ah yes, this wonderful instrument features the adventures of Hairlock Sholmes. It's a world-famous Stradivarius. Strata what? Stradivarius, Mr. Naruhodo. Stragivor. Are you even trying now? Japanese people can't speak Italian, apparently? Well, come back to this another time, I think. I never heard of anybody really making fun of how difficult it is to pronounce Stradivarius. Or Stradivari. It's curious how this enormous metal chest is being used as a coffee table. And even more curious to think what Iris's father's notes about Mr. Schultz's case are inside it. You mustn't look in there, Runo. Those notes are a secret between Daddy and me. And Mr. Sholmes isn't somehow in on the secret? Hurley tends to forget, you see, as soon as he solved a case, in fact. Once when he reads one of my manuscripts, we had a terrible argument about it. Never have I solved such a case, he said. He was absolutely adamant. Sometimes I wonder if he's from another planet, don't you? I do like this fireplace. It's one of the best things I've seen since we arrived in the country, in fact. Although, I do yearn for a Japanese kotatsu. Kotatsu. Putting your legs under a warm blanketed table is so comforting. Do be careful, Mr. Naruhodo. Don't mistakenly put your feet into the fire, will you? You'd suffer terrible burns, you know. I worry sometimes about how Susato-san sees me. Look at all these mementos of Mr. Schultz's past cases. You know, Miss Susato's eyes still sparkle every time she lays eyes on them. But yours don't, do they, Runo? Well, I have read The Adventures of Hairlock Sholmes now, by order of Miss Susato. But the trouble is, having seen the real thing in action, somehow the stories don't quite ring true for me. Well, he does solve the cases, in the end. I suppose so. Perhaps there's more to the great detective than meets the eye. It always strikes me how pretty and neatly arranged this tea set is. It's my favorite one. In fact, I think it's high time for afternoon tea. Wait there, I'll fetch the special blend that I prepared for today. Oh, Iris, you do love your tea, don't you? She looks so happy at the prospect. And after you've drunk it, I'll collect some experimental data, if that's alright. Just what is she about to make me drink? Nitrous oxide. Ah yes, this is where you note down ideas, isn't it, Iris? So, what's on the blackboard today? Buck up, Runo. What is this? Oh, I'm just playing around with ideas for the title of my next month's installment. Another idea I had was the barrel coronet. I'm really torn about which one to use. What do you think, Runo? Anything but buck up, Runo, obviously. I suppose you're right. I tell you what, I'll surprise you with it. You'll have to wait till next month and see. So many sleepless nights. That's a charming little white shelf, and full of charming little bottles, too. Oh yes, but don't touch any of those. They might explode. Charming shelf full of charming bottles, full of charring ingredients. You know, Hurley mistakenly drank from one of them the other day. What and how? I think he was lucky though. He hasn't exploded yet. It's what we call death by spontaneous combustion. Chemistry can be a very hazardous occupation. It's living with Mr. Sholmes that's the hazardous occupation, if you ask me. Okay. If I remember correctly, this large and imposing lump of iron is called a typewriter. To think that every single one of the adventures of Sherlock Sholmes blossomed from this very machine. Oh, it's such a dreamy thought. I actually had to go on it the other day. The metal bars that move when you hit the keys got all tangled up somehow, and that made Iris angry. Mr. Naruhodo, you're ruining my dreamy thoughts. Please don't do that again. Now I've made Susato-san angry as well. Iris? That's incredible concentration, that is. I find it quite remarkable how she can focus on so many different things at once. Perhaps I should try drinking more herbal tea. The blend third from the right would be good for you, Reno. Oh, Iris? This girl is destined for great things, I'm sure. Okay. Finish that. Okay, that's it, I guess. Here we see the soap, but can't examine it from this side. Okay. That's the last place we have is the prison, right? So, I said to try more of this stuff. Okay. So that makes me really stuck because I feel like I've exhausted all the examines in all the rooms. And I've gotten through all of these converses, right? These are all checked off. I've done all the presents as well. And I've been to all the places. So this is so the prison's a complete dead end, right? So we can't do the prison. Then all the examines, all the converses, right? Presented everything to him. This part is a different color. It's an exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British to turn a boring soap bar into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinomaru design as Japanese flag. I expect this is a rather expensive soap. That doesn't seem likely given who it belongs to. Whoever opened this envelope didn't bother with a letter opener or scissors, did they? Yes, whoever opened it was clearly someone with an unrefined temperament. And judging from the angle of the rip here, the person in question must have been right-handed. Miss Usato, I think perhaps someone's been reading too much of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You can never read too much of it, Mr. Naruhodo. Never. Okay. It's very fine embroidery here that shows the name of the armband's owner. In this case, Kazuma Asogi. So I always carry around my best friend's hopes and dreams with me on my right arm, just here, all the time. To be honest, it's something that weighs very heavily on me. No, I didn't realize it was such a burden, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, I think it's why my right shoulder aches so much. Are you sure it's not to do with you reading in bed or the like? Okay, examined everything in here. Okay, so still can't find anything here. Want to review any of these? This is where I would have missed something. The stump is hitting me, the stumpness. Can't examine the fork? Nope. Ah, there we go! Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shakespeare and his guest drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking anyway, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true, but there could be residue. So one was Mr. Shakespeare's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. Soseki-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. It took me so long just to find that, like, one thing to examine. Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fellow in the clink, I went to report this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low being back in his cell again so soon. I'm sure. We should probably... What's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Out, out, brief candle. Life but a waking shadow, a poor player. That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part? It is a tale, told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Indeed, O happy day. Fucking dead? The fellow isn't dead at all. What was that nonsense you were saying, though? I think, yes, it was from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare. So it was that the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare, came back to life. If the man had indeed been poisoned, it transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment, and Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime. Whatever that now was. Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume, arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Shakespeare did consume poison, as we deduced, but it was an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder. Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? He looks like he's trying to see into Soseki-san's lodgings. There's something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo. Excuse me, can we have a word? Ah. He just ran off. I feel sure that I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? He was having an argument with Shakespeare. Chapter 4 of the previous game. I do too, but I don't remember. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. I mean, if he is the culprit, that would be lame. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison and speak with Mr. Natsume again, but if his name is Shin, that makes it slightly less lame. A good idea. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume, have the police finished questioning you now? Locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Oh, yes? What is he? What is he? Tell me. Is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me? Let me guess, you're talking about Mr. Sholmes. He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume, not a ghost. But his diabolic deductions, they're not of this world. They've left me... cursed. I'm cursed, I tell you. Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You were heavily involved in the deduction, too. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news. Oh. The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you can only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume? It's terrible! Oh. I'm stuck in the cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick! You did it, didn't you? Confess, you're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions. I'm sorry to hear that. This is that selfish shyster. Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you are going to come back to life, why bother dying? Wickedly wishy-washy William. Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shamspear was never actually dead in the first place. Yes, that might make sense, and I'm pleased that he's alive, of course. Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last. Oh. Oops. Mr. Natsume, does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shamspear, didn't you? I'm not saying another word. I demand I have a lawyer present. What do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. Why am I cursed like this? I could present my badge, but I'm not going to. Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume? There's nothing to tell. Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday. Case that saw poor Miss Green hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday. After the trial was over, I trudged my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening at past 9, it must have been, I visited Mr. Shamspear. So you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared. I didn't do anything wrong. I've never been to his room before. It was the first time. Then what made you decide to go? I bumped into him when I arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. But he had to go out, so I bade him farewell. That ties in with what Mr. Garadeb said, that the victim went out and came back after 8. We met again later that evening, at around 9 or just after. Then I took him some nice tea I brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you? Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet. Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate. I'm sure. Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare. And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea? No, never, not at all. Team Juliet won, that was me, and then I left his room. The flamboyant fellow was fighting fit. I swear it, categorically. Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence. I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and at that time I've learnt that it's no place for me. It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture. There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me, they all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember, and then 1 week ago I moved into Briar Road. But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable. Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me. The rent? Obviously there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed. Cursed how? The previous occupant, the man who lived there before I took the room, died there. Oh no. He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why. Surely no one would want to live in a room with a history like that. I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books. And books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed a lease like lightning. Brave, or blinkered? But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room history really was. Gosh, was it really so awful? How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened? At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me. Do you think that might have been your mind playing tricks on you? No, my mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given the keys to the place. Oh, it's the guy we saw before in the yellow outfit. Okay. Nightmare. You've been having bad dreams, you mean? All the souls who've died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me. That really is horrible. And now I come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shakespeare was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room. You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible. Yes, you're right, I know it. And that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home. I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you yourself may become history. Well, Susato-san knows how to make the man listen. Of course. My lord of the manor is worried about the curse on my room as well. You mean Mr. Garadeb? Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again. Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't go near the place. Ah, perhaps. That may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps in his tenants' movements. You mean because he's worried about their well-being? He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his let rooms. What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps? Oh dear, no, it's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please, forget I said anything. Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well. What's important is that Mr. Shakespeare isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come around, he's able to tell us what happened. And we'll be able to get you released. Yes, please. I do hope you're right. Ahem, excuse me. Inspector Gregson. I wouldn't help overhearing what you just said, and on that note, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh. Which do you want to hear first? Always, every time, the bad news comes first. When hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news is this. The good news it is, huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. And why'd you ask me my preference? As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shakespeare, was just unconscious. He come around now. Yes, we saw it happen in all its terrifying glory. He's still being treated by the doctors, but we've managed to get a written statement from him already. Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume? Thank goodness, it's all over then. I can leave this somber cell. Sorry, no, that's not in the cards, because he accused you of doing it. What? Why ever not, Inspector? Mr. Shakespeare has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night. Implicated someone? Oh dear. You don't mean... I'm sorry to say I do, yes. He pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. Arg. By sweet poison did he seeketh into my life. Wickedeth caitiff, Soseki Natsume. No. So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You'll be wanting to make the necessary preparations. No! And so, once again, Soseki-san found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court and do my utmost to break the curse that blighted him. And we have a trial. We'll save this for, like, a couple of days from now. Sweet. Okay. That'll be it for this session. Still nothing about the overall mysteries revealed yet.